are very optimistic initially, for whatever reason. I mean, yeah, people were saying, like, I remember on Friday, oil prices are going down $10. It's
No,
just
that's not good.
it's just there's no things are going to move very slowly, I think, very slowly. Well,
Well,
I mean, we'll find. I mean, I don't know
I'm
what
more
your
optimistic than
telling
you are.
I don't know what your friends are telling you in Venezuela, but to me, it
They're,
looks like things are going to go really slowly here.
Well, we're going to find out right now because we've got Mr. Jose Gonzales back with us again. Wow, Jose, I didn't think we were going to talk for a while, but things have happened so fast. I guess, let's just jump into it, man. I'm not going to go through your bio because it doesn't matter anymore. People can look back at the first. We got Jean is kind of skeptical about things in Veni. I'm obviously more positive. Give us a view, Jose. Tell us what's happening on the ground.
I mean, it was we expected back the second half last year. We got the sense, we start getting the feeling that the Trump administration was serious about doing something in Venezuela. We have talked with the Pentagon at some point, and they said, "Will you mobilize an effort carrier group? You have to do something or stand down." And nothing seemed to indicate that they would stand down. After they start the attacks on the so-called drug dealing fleet of fishermen that act, illegally, forcefully for drug dealers. Otherwise, the consequences are serious for themselves. We were expecting some sort of operation in the ground, and then it was that early hours of January 3rd in which, was wake up at 2:37 saying the Caracas is being bombed. So I went to bed like at 4:30, and then I woke up at 6:30, and then Maduro is being captured, and it's on his ways to the United States, and we saw them on a jumpsuit yesterday in a court in Brooklyn, in New York. So it's unbelievable as it is. It happened. So what's next? I mean, that's your question, isn't it? What are the perspectives? And President Trump from Mar-a-Lago saying that they trust Delcy Rodriguez more Maria Corina Machado. It was sobre palos piedras, we say in Spanish, isn't it? I mean, after the bad, there's stones. And there's that. This is the second shock. So he talks blatantly. This is not about democracy. This is about oil. So, and the market goes as you mentioned, Tom, in sort of a frenzy. I think I haven't talked about Venezuela as much since Saturday as it was back in the oil opening days of the late 1990s. Oh, so and everybody now is interested in Venezuela, and everybody's an expert in Venezuela. Well, things are quite complex in a certain way. What for me is clear, right? Exactly, and now everybody knows about Venezuela. It's been a bold move, isn't it? Not even George Bush's father or son dared to do what President Trump has done. I mean, Noriega was a very peculiar situation back in the day, but there was still 15,000 men, U.S. uniformed men and women in Panama, and the invasion took another 15,000. There was sort of 30,000 more or less. I mean, the Panama Canal was not given back to the Panamanians until 10 years later, and that was 36 years to the day in which Noriega gave himself up to took refuge in the Vatican embassy in Panama City. And back in the day, the Torrijos-Carter agreements allowed the U.S. to invade Panama to protect the canal no matter what. It's a clause within the agreements that the Panamanians have to accept from the U.S. Congress. And Bush Jr., when he invaded Iraq after invasion of Kuwait, got all the international law in line. And so did Jr., even though politically they sort of, it was until after false pretensions. Trump just did it. He just went into Venezuela, took Maduro, shipped it to the U.S., accused him of, having machine guns and drugs and whatever. We'll see how the trial evolves. But most likely Maduro will spend the rest of his life in jail in the United States. And then the administration chooses the continuity within the regime of Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president, minister of finance, minister of energy and petrol, sister of the president of Congress, because she can guarantee order within the country in what now it's a clear transition. And Maria Corina Machado is a nice lady, but she can wait. So there's a discussion. Did we violate international law? Yes. But in these days of real politics, plus, is that really important? It's important as long as the U.S., which was the guarantor of the international rule-based system, is now part of the Russia, or what Russia or China would do. I mean, that's going to have some consequences into the future. But I think nobody laments Maduro being in jail in the United States. And there are certain concerns about the international law. On the other hand, there's this discussion. Was there a regime change, or is it a continuation of the regime? You have to think in terms of chess. There was a checkmate to the king in Venezuela. I mean, once you checkmate the king, it's a new game. So the regime might be in a continuity in Venezuela, but it's a new game. It's a new thing. And snatching Maduro out of Fuerte Tiuna, of all places, while he was sleeping after his 5 rings of security, bombing Caracas, doing it in 13 minutes. I mean, the general commander of the armed forces, General Padrino, and Diosdado Cabello have lost all their value, and all the symbolism of this force in ground that guaranteed the integrity of the motherland, and everything else is broken. And Delcy Rodriguez, she's radical when it comes to ideology. She's pragmatic when it comes to policy, but she's ruthless. And I think changes are going to come. She cannot guarantee. We cannot guarantee that everything is business as usual. It's too early to tell. And all the criminal organization around the supply of foods and everything else in Venezuela, the export of oil is broken. Everything is broken. Whatever you see is the remnants of a regime that is trying to figure out what to do. And it's clear from the indications in Washington and for what she said before she was swearing to Congress yesterday, that she would contribute to Americans, and the protectorate is going to be put in place. And remember, Thomas, until the nationalization of the industry in 1976, Venezuela was a U.S. protectorate. I mean, during Gomez, during the Pacto Fijo, Kennedy, the only big country that Kennedy visited while he was president was Venezuela. And he was received as the Viceroy of England in India would receive the king. And that was broken in 76. And President Trump is trying to bring things back to pre-1976. And he said yesterday he's in control in Venezuela. Can he really control Venezuela? No, in Venezuela. Can Delcy control Venezuela? We don't know yet, but the transition has started, and it is unavoidable geologically, and there is the financial resources for Venezuela to increase production, because in this peculiar conflict, nor the attacker suspended the license on Chevron, not those that were attacked kick out Chevron out of country. Chevron did the right bet years ago, and he's going to harvest Venezuelan petroleum going forwards.
Jose, have you had any contacts with people on the ground there?
Yes, a lot. I mean, as you know, we were bankers. When I was working with ING from 96 to 98, we were part of the syndicate that funded the Jose refinery in Venezuela. So we worked with Rafael Caldera's second government. And during Chavez's second administration, we did the PDVSA bond of $7.5 billion. That was 2007. So we always have and maintain good relationship with the government. We work with President Rodriguez now on the acquisition of CanTV when it was nationalized and it was owned by Verizon. So I know him well. And we were investment bankers of Civenza, who is the company of Maria Corina Machado. And I lived in Venezuela on 3 occasions, so we know a lot of people on both sides of the equation. It's calm, Jean, but it's calm based on fear, not in complacency. I mean, I think people have learned their lessons in the past. The repression has worked, and there's a fear of anarchy. And that in that anarchic, in potential anarchy, you can get hurt. And remember, 1/3 of the population have left the country. So those that had the energy to resist and protest are gone. and there's fear towards the future. Nobody knows what's gonna happen. As obviously from the transitional regime, if we can call that, Delcy Rodriguez presidency, there's a narrative that that Maduro is brilliant and he's going to be liberated and the trial is not going to work, and the opposition is muted because Trump just basically put them aside. And without the U.S. support in this protectorate, what role can they play? Now the feeling is Delcy Rodriguez gonna be so successful that he can finish Maduro's term? Hardly. Um, I think he's from probation for the next 90 days, both from the U.S. and within his own regime. If he survives 90 days, we have another 90 days. President Trump has said that there won't be election in 30 days, so it doesn't seem to be on any of the sides a long-term commitment. So it might take 6 months to a year to sort of get a definition, but I think elections will come and Venezuela will go on a path, and we will see what's the real role of the U.S., what happens in the midterm elections, and what if that impacts Trump and its policy towards Venezuela. But the Colorado of the Trump of the Monroe Doctrine is now in place. Is it gonna go beyond Venezuela? The president is talking about, again, about Colombia, the way he talked in Panama when he was swearing to the presidency. Is this going to happen? Hardly to believe. What is going to happen in Venezuela? Chevron has said when they got the license, they wait patiently for years and years and years. And when they get the license, they say that they would bring the production from 300,000 barrels or so. A few years ago, in the midst of the worst crisis we've seen in Latin America, Venezuela's GDP shrunk by 80%. To 1 million in less than a year and a half. They did. They were expected to grow production 40% last year, but due to the big, beautiful bill and the impact of the vote on Congress, that was delayed. So we can expect to see an increase in production to 1.25 million barrels a day this year. Now there's a consensus. Venezuela can bring back production to 3 million barrels within 5 years and up to 4 to 6 million barrels within the next 10 years after those 5 years. Geology is there. Capital is not a problem anymore. Secretary Rubio has talked about an investment of $100 billion. That's exactly the number that Chevron uses. Chevron distributes dividends and buybacks in stock around $20 billion a year, 22, 24. Chevron produces 3.3 million barrels of oil a day, half of it in the Permian. There's indications that the Permian is starting to have problems, and in 10, 15, 20 years, it might go dry in a certain way. The International Energy Agency is now aligned with OPEC, saying that we won't reach peak demand in oil in 2030, but in 2050. So we're going to consume more oil because we consume less oil. There's going to be a deficit at some point of conventional oil in the world of plus minus 6 million barrels, and it's going to come from Venezuela. So there's this feeling that things are going to get better in the ground. The Chavismo has not disappeared. Deschavización is going to be like this Nazification in Germany after the fall of Berlin. How is that going to happen? How all of these criminal networks, these dark, gray, black networks that supply Venezuela from everything and export oil are going to be replaced by a new set of networks. That is it's what is starting to happen. There's sort of a frenzy. Everybody wants to go to Venezuela to see it or see how you turn opportunities into business. It's not gonna be that simple. Yet I don't think it's gonna be as complex as Iraq. This is the Western world. This is Venezuela. It's a country we know really well. We have worked. The first time I went to Venezuela was in 1994 when Tom Samuelson hired me and sent me to Caracas. So that's when it started. And it's Venezuela. It's the Western world. Venezuelans are lovely. They easygoing. They're kind of chaotic. But I think it started. And Delcy Rodriguez, we were in 2017, before the sanctions of the first Trump administration, we were engaged to help them restructure sovereign debt. By then, they knew they could not pay. And we work in that process. And Delcy Rodriguez is very pragmatic. And he's very aware that you need an Article 4 and you need to start the restructuring process of the debt because once the economy starts recovering, um, embargoes, that is going to be a problem. And now you have to think, in this economy that used to be $400 billion annual GDP of 50 billion, if Chevron projections work, this economy is going to jump from 50 to 200 billion in a relative short period of time, 5-7 years. So all the conditions for restructuring and pay that they're going to change. Now there's this discussion: is it going to be Iraq, or is it going to be Argentina? Is it going to be Peru? Somewhere in between. You have the asset, you have the oil. I mean, Brent is at 60 and doesn't want to move from it, 61. But in time, oil is a resource you want to have when it comes to face the challenges. Again, answering your question, things are quiet. There's a lot of expectations. Nobody's going back to Venezuela immediately. The opposition is trying to figure out what to do, especially Maria Corina Machado. My feeling is that if there's an election, when there's an election, and it should be within a year, she will win the election. I mean, that it's sort of unavoidable, isn't it? She has a will and a passion and a charisma that is unstoppable. And I think people within Chavismo are taking her in the same way the conservative took Chavez wrongly. I mean, Chavez was a force of nature, and he did what he did, for good or bad. It's part of history now. And I think she's that kind of figure. So we gotta have a reset in Venezuela, unless Delcy Rodriguez is so successful that she can finish that term and she becomes, the president of the long transition. I don't see that either. There's a lot of things that need to happen in the next months and years for the thing to consolidate. But obviously, the future of Venezuela is bright. Everything needs to be reconstructed, infrastructure, cars. Chevron used to say that when you start greenfield projects, they're long and complicated. Brownfield projects are easier. I mean, it's in ruins, but you can rebuild it. The engineering has been already done. It's just a matter of putting the money in place, the engineers, and they already order all their employees back to Venezuela. So that is starting to work. If the U.S. opens the embassy, if President Trump is good in gearing this investment into Venezuela, if Chevron is in Venezuela increasing production, what kind of risk are you taking, Venezuelan or U.S. risk? Combination of both. It's not simple, but it's better than most.
Jose, we have seen just some assets, right? You've seen reactions in the sovereign bonds have traded well. They were trading well before this happened, so there's been anticipation. The bond vigilantes will right again. Obviously, the local stock market today has reacted the way it's normally. It's up, 80% in 2 days, whatever. But the FX, which is one thing that I'm watching very carefully, the black market rate closed, I think, over 700. The expectation is that it's obviously going to strengthen and get near the official rate, which is 304, whatever. Why do you think, and that's obviously what you mentioned, fear and concerns, but what's going to be the trigger for the FX? Because that's what I think a lot of people are watching, the black rate to become closer to the official rate.
Depends on oil, isn't it? I mean, the problem was prior to Maduro's capture was the blockade. I mean, the blockade was it was going to crush Venezuela's economy the way it was set up. And once the Chevron license was put in place, and the modification already had an effect because it constrained the use of those oil barrels in a different way that the Biden administration did. And the Chinese, who bought half of the production, was still buying it at a deep discount. So that calculation had to be made. And that's what Caracas, with Maduro was still in place, was trying to appease the U.S. And the last offering of Maduro was, you can do whatever you want with the oil industry, while Trump was already working on the military operation that took place on January 3rd. So that was keeping things in place. But now that there's a clear, the blockade is still in place as a threat. If Rodriguez doesn't do what the Trump administration wants her to do. But and most likely all this oil is not going to be funneled through Chevron to the United States. So the Chinese are out of the game. The Iranians are out of the game. The Gray Fleet is out of the game. There's reports in Bloomberg this morning that there's 6 tankers from Chevron going into Venezuela. Now the diluents you need to lower the API of Venezuelan crudes to be exported to the Gulf to be refined are in place. So it's a win-win for Chevron. I mean, and oil companies they can take that risk, and the train of tankers going from Jose and Puerto Cabello to the Gulf to Corpus Christi is gonna go back. I mean, that's what always been the convenience of Venezuela, isn't it? So the equation will be in place, and they can increase that production. Things are gonna stabilize and improve to a certain degree. The Venezuelan economy was already recovering. This is an economy that reached in its worst case, in its worst moment, $30 billion. It was smaller than Guatemala, I believe, and now it's sort of recovering, growing at levels of 5 to 8%. If it goes to 200 billion, which should be its normal size within 5 years, this economy is going to triple in size. A lot of things are going to happen. Being Venezuela is going to be kind of chaotic. I mean, if you increase that oil production, restructure is going to happen. We're already having a lot of calls. And in those calls, also addressing your question, Jenny, our thing is, if we would be exporting underwear, we will be finding the cheapest producer of underwear in China and sell it through Tijerazo or whoever in Caracas, isn't it? It's the business. These transactions are more complex. How do we make the opportunity, the macro opportunity, into a transaction? We need rule of law, we need certain stability, we need counterparts. That's what the restructuring of the debt is going to take time, but the PDVSA and the sovereign are already giving you a sense of where things are going to be. I agree with you. The FX is the thermometer. Look what's happening in Iran. I mean, that was a sign of what could happen in Venezuela. That was creating fear within the regime, and it still creates fear within the regime. The Trump administration did a bombing in Nigeria, of all places, against ISIS, but it was an indication that things could happen. Now, restructuring needs to happen in a relative short period of time. If you reopen the U.S. Embassy, and it seems that they're already cleaning it, they're using vacuum cleaners, so they're going back. There's an ambassador in Colombia, McNamara, that can fly from Bogota to Caracas tomorrow. If they reopen that and the things might move fast, and then if the U.S. that has 14% of vote in the IMF orders a mission, Caracas requested they order a mission. The mission of the IMF can be in Venezuela within the month, and the Article 4 can start being discussed. So the next question, which is going to have a serious impact, is what's the recovery value of Venezuelan debt? And for that, we only have theory, but you have to do it with projections 10 years, 20 years, 30 years towards the future of what size of an economy can it be. And the IMF need to give us the magic number, sustainability of debt payments. That's the magic number. The all discussions of the steering committee, they don't work anymore. It's the IMF who gives the number that allows. But if it would be the case of Ecuador and Peru, which were the last historic restructurings, we don't consider Argentina was complicated. 22, 24 cents. Elliot got like what, close to 30, 29, 31. But Ecuador did at sort of like that 24, 26. Peru did at what, 32, 36. So the recovery value of the Venezuelan debt should be in the 30s, in the lower 30s. But they have oil warrants. If you can put oil warrants in that recovery value because of what Chevron is doing, what might happen, you can have a better recovery value, and the debt is sort of playing with those levels right now. 40 cents, certain of the bonds, 10 to 50, and then it starts getting tricky.
Jose, this is certainly the first application of the Donroe Doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
In essence, countries do what the U.S. or else they're in big trouble. How does this protectorate even work? I mean, what's the model? Have you seen this anywhere, even historically? A protectorate means basically the U.S. ambassador goes to see the president a couple times a week and tells him what to do, and the president does it. Yeah. And elections don't matter because it doesn't matter who wins, because you still have to receive the ambassador and take his orders. Mm-hmm. Is this what you mean by protectorate?
I mean, Puerto Rico is a protectorate, isn't it? The Philippines
Puerto
used
Rico
to
is
be.
part of the U.S.
Yes, but it started as a protectorate when the Spanish were to Spain. You ended up getting Puerto Rico, and we got even the Philippines at some point, and then we let the Philippines go, and it became a state with
Well, the
certain
Philippines were
limitations.
run by the U.S., right? General MacArthur
Yes,
ran the U.S. for a long time.
exactly.
Is that
Yes.
what you mean? That we would appoint somebody to run it?
I mean, that's what when President Trump gave the press conference in Mar-a-Lago. He said, "We are in charge," and you see, he's the Secretary of War, the Secretary of State, and plus National Security Advisor. Who else was there? Miller, his advisor in terms of immigration, and there was something else, the Joint Chief of Staff. But President Trump, he said today, "I'm in charge," and Maduro said in court, "I'm the president of Venezuela." So who's in charge and how the protector is going to work? Back in the day when the Creole, an oil company that disappeared, ran Venezuela's oil, they have their headquarters in a business in Francisco de Miranda Avenue, which is called Menegrande, which was this beautiful gusher oil field with natural pressure that the Creole had at the time. Coincidentally, our offices were at the Menegrande. I mean, I worked in that building for 5 years. And that was the first headquarters of PDVSA when it was nationalized in 1976. What was across the Menegrande building? The U.S. Embassy, which is now the UNEFA, a public university created by the Chavez government. So before you could do nothing, you would go to the Creole and the U.S. Embassy. And there was the U.S. military mission in Fuerte Tiuna, from where Maduro was snatched, that Chavez expelled from the country after the coup of 2001, 2002, since the Americans were conspiring with the military against him. So that's the way the protectorate worked at the time. Gomez worked under a protectorate. Betancourt, the first years of the Pacto de Punto Fijo, worked under that protectorate. You would consult with the Americans before you would do nothing. I think that's the way the protectorate will work, and it goes from oil to the politics. And now I think Delcy Rodriguez is gonna put Venezuela's oil to the service use disposition of the U.S. Now in critical minerals, the Monroe Doctrine talk about a spheres of influence. In critical minerals, we talk about sphere of control. And you can see that very clearly. Why is China investing heavily in African mining? Because he controls it. He doesn't influence it. He owns it. He runs it. And they did that in Africa because the resources that China owns in Latin America are limited. I mean, Latin America, when it comes to critical minerals, has all the presence of all the Western large corporations. You see the case in Peru. You see this thing in Chile. The strength of China when it comes to critical minerals is copper refining and rare earth production and refining, but that's very singular. Putin controls his oil and gas in Russia, and he wants to extend that control certainly through the invasion of Ukraine and the threat he represents to Western Europe. And Trump now wants to control the energetic resources, first of Venezuela and then the rest of Latin America. He's going to have it harder to do what he has done to Venezuela and Mexico. In fact, if he's against narco terrorism or the cartels, they're in Mexico. They're not in Venezuela. I mean, the courts yesterday or today dropped the Cartel de los Soles part of the indictment to Maduro because it doesn't exist as a cartel. It's not as the cartels of Mexico. It doesn't exist as an instructor of a criminal organization for the purpose of producing and smuggling drugs in the U.S. Certain parts of the military are involved in the drug business, and Maduro and company, just turned their head to the other side. But the real business was always oil.
So you think the indictment in New York will not hold?
It's weak. I mean, when you read it, the 22 pages, I mean, they say that the 2020 indictment is more solid. But there's
why do you think he will be convicted then and spend the rest of his life in jail?
Because it's a political decision at some point, isn't it? I mean,
are politicized?
Is he gonna get due process, like for real? I mean, we have a 92-year-old judge in charge, and he said he's gonna do whatever he's gonna do. I mean, you cannot you cannot intervene with the judiciary,
So,
but it's
so
also
hold
hard.
on a second. So not only is democracy over in Latin America, the rule of law is over in the U.S. This is a really
Correct.
nice.
But welcome to the Trump administration, isn't it? I mean, that's what Trump has been trying to do from the beginning. January 6th. We are 6 years out of what happened in Washington, D.C. Was that an assault on democracy? Yes, it was. I mean, you have to say it. I mean, was the president indicted? No, I mean, the president was indicted and declared guilty, but when it comes to sentencing, the judge sentenced him without sentencing him because it was an absurd to put the president-elect of the United States in jail, even though the law would allow him to be in jail and rule the country. So those things,
So if Latin America has become a protectorate of the U.S., to me that seems incompatible with democracy.
yes.
How is Latin America going to react to this? Is it they're just going to be tame and accept the new tutorship of the U.S.? It doesn't sound much like Latin Americans.
I mean, remember why was Trump beating Latin America from the beginning? Why did he choose to shake Latin America, not Africa or Asia or nothing? Because
they're weak, and it's one place that he can easily.
And you exactly, that's the answer. And we're broken. I mean, the European Union, you can argue if it works or not, but it's solid. It works. I mean, there's an agreement between 27 countries to work together. And the pandemic and the post-pandemic for Western Europe was a much better scenario than the US because capitalism works here in a different way. The welfare state is much alive in Europe, and it sort of works well. In Latin America, no such thing exists. We are divided, we're fragmented, we can be shaken. And there's countries aligned with Trump, there's countries aligned with other forces, but there's no real consensus. And Venezuela was the best place to start this Don't Road doctrine in the sense that nobody would really care about Venezuela. The Chinese were not going to war with the US for Venezuela, neither the Iranians, neither the Russians. And Mexico and Brazil, that are around now on the left side of the political spectrum, condemned the actions but did not defend Trump. Neither did Petro from Colombia. I mean, Chile just switched into the conservative side. Argentina is on the conservative side. Peru is a mess, but probably will remain on the conservative side. So is Colombia. Colombia is going to the center, to the right in elections this year because Petro has been such a disappointment for the own Colombians, Central America, the Caribbean. That happened also Maduro. Maduro was losing and was left alone. Bolivia, Ecuador, and there's this Trumpian thing coming from El Salvador and the rest of Latin America. The new Chilean president comes from that source too. But is that allow them, this protector, to happen? No. But the influence of the U.S. in Latin America is going to be very strong. This tariff thing that and the way it has worked from the U.S. side has had an effect on the region, and it will continue to have it. The only way Latin America would come stronger in this cycle, and because we have energy resources, we have critical minerals, we have agribusiness, we have water, we have everything that the U.S. need, everything that the world needs. We're the largest exporter of foodstuffs in the world, $100 billion a year. Peru last year broke what was supposed to be the limit of agribusiness export of $10 billion. We exported $12 to $14 billion and keep growing. President Trump has to take out 200 items from its tariffs in terms of foodstuff to reduce inflation pressure in supermarkets in the U.S. If we are aware of that and create a bloc that works, because separated we're very weak, but united we have a stronger position. That work, but that's gonna take years. I mean, the protectorate Trump pretends is not gonna work the way he wants, but he's gonna try. And in Venezuela,
the only investor in Latin America for the past 10 years has been China.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, America hasn't really invested a penny except for the tech companies because they're monopolies everywhere.
Yes.
But nobody else has invested Americans haven't invested in Latin America.
No. And
then do you convince, like, say, a Brazil or Chile, to completely alienate the Chinese because Trump has told them to do it? Or Peru, does Peru have to nationalize the port and give it over to Trump?
It's not going to happen. But remember, the Chinese are not looking for confrontation with the U.S. I mean, this is a symbiotic relationship. The Chinese needs U.S. consumption. We need Chinese production. That is changing. I mean, exports from import from China has declined, but export from China to the rest of the world have increased. And when Biden told Xi, competition without conflict, and Xi responds to him, yes, that's the way. There's enough space in this planet for two hegemonies. That was the way it's supposed to work. And then Trump came. Trump cannot get rid of the Chinese, but the Chinese know that when it comes to natural resources, the U.S. influence presence, the Western world influence is too strong. They have made investments in mining in the region, but they're not the largest. I mean, that is happening in Africa, and Africa is a different world. There's a new set of military rulers in Africa that manage things in a very different way. The real strength in China when it comes to critical minerals, which is what is really the key here, is refining. Everything you produce, 40% of copper is refined in China. So the relationship between Peru and China, Chile and China, is on the refining side, not on the production side. Whoever produces copper in it's very fragmented, but it's mostly Western, Australian, Canadians, Americans, Chileans, and the Chinese are part of that, but not. And they have done serious investments, as you mentioned, Jan, in Peru: electricity distribution, electricity generation, the port of Chancay. Trump has not touched or mentioned Peru at all. It's like somehow Peru is not in his map. But after what happened in Venezuela, is there gonna conflict come for the Chancay port? Nobody has expressed it in the Trump administration, but we have 3 and some years to go. So or less, yeah, 3 years. We know 3 years and a few days to go, but that might not be. And again, China is not gonna work. The problem is what we discussed. I mean, after what Trump did in Venezuela, do the Chinese feel that they can do it the same with Taiwan? Would they? I mean, really, TMC is a business that depends on 35 countries. China buys Taiwan tomorrow. They're not going to get access to those chips. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
And Venezuela is a singular case. It's very peculiar. And in the case of Venezuela, Chevron make the right bet. I mean, they gonna be the majority of Venezuela's oil production going forwards. I mean, if Venezuela reaches those 6 million barrels a day, Chevron might not have it all, but it has a big chunk of it. And ExxonMobil, all the companies that left when Chavez nationalized the industry and are suing Venezuela, might decide to do what if these assets that they will go back and they will recover what Chevron has been doing. Chevron has been paid back what the Venezuelan government owned them with the export of this oil. So Venezuela might be a singularity, and the Colorado of the Monroe Doctrine might stop in Venezuela. That doesn't mean Trump is going to keep trying to do it. But and as you said, John, the other problem in Brazil and Mexico is not only what the politics can do, is that the Mexican and Brazilian transnational are huge. I mean, the Mexican and the Brazilian corporate sector make the wrong decision. They become so strong. Then they're untouchable. I mean, Lopez Obrador nationalized Bimbo, and who cares? You only nationalize Mexico. This is an international company. We take you to the international arbitration, to the World Bank, and they're untouchable now. Now they have to deal with same thing with Brazil. Different in Argentina, different. Chile and Uruguay have peculiarities. Peru is as a singularity that is trying to go for it. It's in Colombia is very stable, even though, I mean, Petro has not been able to collapse Colombia no matter what, and Colombia is not going to collapse, and it's going to switch as soon as this year. And then you have Venezuela. That's what.
Jose, you know Chevron's operations in Venezuela better than I do, but I thought it was mainly processing of extra heavy Orinoco oil sands. Is that what they're doing? And
no, they produce.
What is the break even for that oil?
They produce oil. I mean, Venezuela, Chevron has been producing oil in Venezuela since 1922. They've been in
Yeah,
country for more than a century, and they have a, I think it's Petroboscan, if I'm not. I remember they have a field that has been produced. They produce oil. They produce 250,000 barrels a
but that's
day.
from oil sands, isn't it?
Excuse me?
It's from the Orinoco heavy oil belt.
No, it's an oil field on Maracaibo.
Okay, because I think
Oh,
the
oh,
Exxon investments were all in the belt.
yes, the bell
And I
was
wonder
open. The open.
what the
The,
break even for that is. I don't know.
I mean, living cost in Venezuela is very low, but the yield on the fields, it's at the same time. Lifting cost is very low. One of the lowest in the world. I mean, we made the calculation. It was $4 to $8 lifting cost. Total cost per barrel was around, if I remember well, I would have to review those numbers. It was very profitable. I mean, and you would make serious returns even at the historical average level of $34 a barrel. The thing with when once conventional oils is starting to diminish in Venezuela as everywhere else, you open the faja, the belt. And in the belt you have the heavy crudes, extra heavy crudes, and the ultra heavy crudes, and yeah, so of the 300 billion barrels of oil in Venezuela, you're only gonna be able to produce half of it because the rest you cannot lift it. And the recovery on the average field on the belt was 14%, i.e., from 100% of oil in the field, you only can lift 14%, up to 24 in certain fields. Otherwise, it's so heavy you cannot keep sucking it. But yet, what is happening now? Remember, the fracking oil is mostly light crudes, and now the industry have realized that you need conventionals, heavy crudes, in order for refineries to make the blends that allow you to produce. I mean, what I said, the recovery of the average field is very low. But what happens? Why is Venezuela oil so valuable? Because most of the oil they have everything. Most of the oil in Venezuela is fracking oil, which is non-conventional. Uh, and yeah, Venezuela oil is needed for the refining process in the Gulf, and the heavy crudes give you the whole spectrum of oil and have the better margins from asphalt to gasoline and you need that for diesel, and you need that for naphthas, for kerosenes that you use in aviation and everywhere else. The question is, when nobody else consumes oil for transportation, maritime operations are going to keep consuming diesel. I mean, there's no barriers to move a tanker with 3 million barrels, so we're gonna consume diesel almost forever, and we need that for petrochemicals and for agriculture, for fertilizers. So that's the real value of Venezuela. That deficit of conventional oil we're gonna face in the next few decades is gonna be supplied in the Western world by Venezuela, and it's gonna be still very profitable. Venezuela, for any given purpose, has oil forever, like forever. They're never gonna run out of it. We're going to change completely the matrix until Venezuela runs out of it. And I think that's what the protectorate that Trump is thinking is all about. I don't know who gave him the thoughts about it, but they're going back again prior to 1976. That was the status quo up to that point, even though Venezuela was always friendly with Americans. Now that oil sort of belongs to the US unless the Venezuelan says otherwise. Are they going to? Delcy is not going to. Maria Corina neither. I mean, Maria Corina's proposition is even more radical than this. She wants to privatize the industry, and the logical buyer will be the Americans. She has to change the constitution. She has to do a lot of things, but one way or another, this thing is going to happen, and that's going to be positive for Venezuela. Politically, a lot of things can happen, but I don't think there's there's not a feeling anymore at this point in Venezuela of what's happening with Pemex, which was nationalized back in 1938 by Cardenas. That's a different story. But even Pemex now is trying to fix its mess. It's the most indebted oil company in the world, $100 billion in financial debt. think there's a feeling of belonging and nationalism with PDVSA that it still exists with Pemex. And even Pemex is trying to get out of its financial mess. Pemex is the most indebted oil company in the world, $100 billion in financial debt. The latest decisions from Sheinbaum government to refinance allowed Pemex to get out of these $200 billion in liabilities. It's starting to be in place. And the only way to recover the Venezuelan oil industry is through American capital. So Trump, in his hyperbolic view of things, might trying to reach beyond Venezuela, but it's very clear that in Venezuela it's starting to happen.
Jose, what's going to be the trigger for, let's say, investors or anyone that's looking at the country are they looking, what are they looking for? Are they looking for, let's say, stability in terms of the Trump administration, say, okay, we're going to keep these local people in charge? Are they looking for the trigger of a date of an election? What do you think investors or anyone that's looking at this country should be watching as a trigger to be as comfortable as you are and I am? That's what
the state of, I mean, the oil people are already very comfortable, isn't it? But the wildcatters, they're and the roughnecks, they're so peculiar. And they will take risks nobody else takes, and the muscle of the oil companies nobody else's has, and the payouts of the oil, it's a unique industry, but it has a value added in terms of infrastructure. That's the next step. All the Caterpillar could not sell a new machine into Venezuela. It was a nightmare because of the licenses and over compliance. That should be gone soon. And once you reopen the U.S. Embassy, it's going to facilitate a lot of things. A lot of U.S. investors wouldn't go to Venezuela because you need an embassy. Even from the fact that you can be kidnapped to the fact that you have a dispute or you need assistance or whatever, or guidance. That is going to start moving the things. Infrastructure, as long as Chevron starts, taking control of the rest of the oil that the Chinese had to the local contractors, and they know how to deal with these gray and dark networks that run the oil production and exports. And they sanctioned the whole operation in Panama from Panamanians in Venezuela that managed that exports to China. That's gone for any given purpose. So once you do that, the first thing to move is going to be infrastructure. So what do you do when infrastructure goes? Look at a Caterpillar. I mean, the equipment needs to be bought left and right. Look at Toyota. Toyota is going to sell more trucks now than they thought they would in their previous projections, or whoever is selling equipment, cars. That is the first thing to move. But for that to spread in the rest of the economy, and again, is how do we make this macro opportunity into actual transactions? The Caracas stock exchange go 80%, but that's probably, $30,000. It's so tiny. It's sort of irrelevant. It doesn't have an aggregate value as other exchanges, and you know that, Tom, really, really well. And the thing is rule of law. I mean, what kind of risks? I mean, you see the reports now in CNBC and Bloomberg of all kinds of brokers organizing visits to Venezuela. To do what? To test the ground, to see what's happening. Is that going to turn into real investment? It's going to take a while. How do you invest? Where are the vehicles? Beyond buying PDVSA and sovereign bonds and betting that the recovery value will be 50 cents on the dollar, the spread is going to take a while. And as everybody says, rule of law, I mean, you have to have a clear horizon that whatever you invest in country is going to be somehow protected and you're going to recover your investment. In the meantime, you're going to use proxies. I mean, that's what happened. I mean, on Monday, Chevron opened up. ExxonMobil goes back to Venezuela. As the problem gets solved, everybody's starting to look to proxies and see how this plays out. But I think the sign already happened. I mean, the change is already in place. And Venezuela is not Iraq. You're not going to have ISIS. You're not going to have, the problems you have. And I think that's also some military analysts were saying that in CNN at some point today. The worst thing that the Americans did was to dismantle the apparatus that held the order in Iraq together, and it became a mess. That's why in Venezuela, you're keeping it together for the time being until you figure out what are the dynamics. You cannot avoid a reaction for the Venezuelans themselves. I mean, you cannot discard that there will be a period of chaos, anarchy, confrontation. Doesn't seem to be the case. And there's now opposition in the new Congress, which is split from Maria Corina's opposition, which also is going to play a role. I think it's going to be more organic than many people think, but the sign is already in place. I mean, Maduro is out. Delcy is friendly to the Americans. He's going to yield to what Trump wants to do. Chevron is in country. The embassy is going to be open. So it's starting to move. Now, what is your appetite for risk when it comes to Venezuela? How do you play it? You're going to play on the liquid side first. And then there's got a lot of private deals to be made, a lot of investments. You have to have the right partners. You have to be very careful. The gray and dark networks are not going to disappear. They're transforming themselves. They're evolving or not. They're scared. They cannot go anywhere. A lot of those people, I mean, there's a list of all the Swiss accounts that were shut down. I mean, where were the Swiss keeping those accounts open until 2 days ago or 3 days ago? Those people cannot go anywhere. Anywhere, you know?
In Caracas.
2017. The last time I was November 2017, and I couldn't go back because every U.S. person that dealt with the Venezuelan government was subjected to some sort of investigation. So we couldn't go anymore. The last time
were all the steakhouses just as good in 2017?
Excuse me?
Were the steakhouses still very good in 2017?
Oh, yes, everything. Venezuela is still good. You know, there's enough money from oil to keep the niche of the good life together. I mean, Los Roques is still there, and it's gorgeous. The food is great. The people are nice. I mean, and the bubbles in Venezuela are very much alive. Not everybody has left. The Boliburguesia created its own ecosystem, and those Venezuelans that being in the opposition but being non-political decide to stay in Venezuela have their ecosystem too. Yes, they're still very good. And you were surprised. You go to Venezuela, there's great restaurants, you know, there's beautiful people around. You have to be careful, you know, because there's still a lot of crime, but it's not Syria, you know. I mean, not even Syria. I believe, you know, you go to Iran and then you realize this country sort of works. Yeah. I mean, in within its own. So that you kind of get the feeling of Venezuela. I mean, there's a lot of poverty that we didn't see before, worse than we've seen before. That needs to be, but oil can do that. And how are you going to create the mechanisms for that to trickle down? That is, it's gonna be, again, that's what the complication is gonna be. You have to be very careful because the Chavismo is all over still, and there's a lot of bandidos within those networks. And if you're an investor, you have to be very careful in not falling in the traps that are gonna be left in place for a while.
So Jose, it sounds like the trigger. You've said it a number of times. Sounds like one of the early triggers is going to be the U.S. opening up the embassy.
Yes,
which will create some stability. That sounds to me very reasonable in terms of something to look out for in the short term, to get people sort of comfortable. So I think that's the first time I've heard that from this whole weekend talking to a lot of people. But that makes sense.
And you're gonna take. I mean, once the U.S. embassy opens and Chevron is there, it never left. And again, it was a peculiarity of this conflict. And and they're gonna put the money in place. They're gonna take there's 6 tankers going to pick up oil as we speak, or you know, put in place by Chevron. The money's gonna be there. Now, who's gonna manage it? Delcy Rodriguez was the architect of the recovery from the dark days of the hyperinflation, the collapse of the currency, and everything else. She's a very organized person. She's very pragmatic, and she's very she knows how to, you know, she plays ping pong at professional level. Besides her office, she has 2 tables of ping pong and 3 sparring people that she plays with. I mean, she's really good. His brother too. Yeah, his brother too. I mean, I don't know. It's just anecdotal, but it tells you something. And I think she's gonna do fine in that sense. I mean, obviously, the opposition doesn't stomach her, but you know, if she has Trump support, what can you do? I mean, it is what it is. So I think that is the thing. I mean, but I think the first business is going to be real business infrastructure. I mean, you have to. What does Chevron need to to increase that production? What does Chevron need and all the oil companies? Halliburton going to Venezuela, of course. The whole oil ecosystem is going back big time. I mean, and if we turn this production from 1 million to 3 million in 5 years, and the GDP triples, there's going to be trickle down all over. Now, how do you play it? Where do you invest? I mean, with a little stock market, no listed Venezuelan companies abroad anymore. Everything you used to trade, Mantex, Uensa, and everything else is gone. It just disappeared. So you play the bonds, and then you have to figure out what kind of private equity can you do and with whom. I mean, there's also people going back trying to recover what they were taking up from them. So there's going to be a lot of litigation. Are the Venezuelan courts going to work? Of course not. Arbitration, all of these things. The whole thing is Trump going to stop the auction of Citgo? I mean, that's something also that's been circulating in the market. It was very close to being auctioned. He can stop it with an executive order, would he? What would be the reasoning of it? Elliott was very close to get it. And that's a very valuable asset in the U.S. that belongs to Venezuela. But now Venezuela doesn't belong to Maduro, belongs to Trump according to himself. So that is also going to happen. But the process is already in the making. I think people are going to be careful. I think investors are going to go back to Venezuela just to see it, to touch it, to get a sense of it. But I don't think you're going to see massive investments beyond oil, and if you're an oil company in the short term, because there's no way to execute it, and the debt has its run. I mean, it's getting to where it needed to get, and it's also going to depend if there's an Article 4, if there's a restructuring, that will be another sign that things move in the right direction, and Delcy Rodriguez is moving there, and I think she might try. I mean, knowing her, to remain in the presidency, but she has to manage the local politics, deal with the U.S. relationship, and make the economy work. It's a huge task.
So Jose, one of the themes, we've had a bunch of people on the podcast, the smart emerging market investors, and a number of them have talked about, let's say, in terms of stock market investments, using Colombia as a proxy. Mm-hmm. And certainly the performance of Bancolombia, which has gone literally parabolic, it's certainly that's what they're doing. Do you think, I mean, forgetting about the stock market, but do you think the Colombians are going to be the ones that are going to have a leg up and are going to, let's say, in a sense, dominate? Are they going to own all the banks? Are they going to own all? I mean, how do you see Colombia?
There's an edge there, isn't it? I mean, the Venezuelan Colombian trade at some point was very promising. It was increasing and increasing and increasing. Colombia produces things that Venezuela's consume at lesser cost than the US or Europe. Consumer goods particularly, and that collapsed when the whole thing, when Venezuela went into crisis. That is an edge. It's an important edge. But for example, I mean, the Venezuelan banking system that was affected by hyperinflation and devaluation is still to a large degree in Venezuelan hands. Banesco, who was the largest Venezuelan bank, Juan Carlos Escotet, when the crisis happened in Venezuela and the bank started shrinking, he leveraged Banesco to buy the nationalized banks in Galicia, and now he created the fourth largest financial group in Spain, I believe, and he has the fifth largest fortune in Spain. So Juan Carlos Escotet has proven that he's a really sophisticated banker. Jose Maria Nogueroles has consolidated a series of small banks into a medium-sized bank with assets abroad. So it's the own Venezuelan bankers that can revitalize the Venezuelan banking system. And it's going to grow with the economy. I mean, Banesco, which was worth, I think, like $3 billion, at some point it only was worth 300 million. So if the economy were to triple in size with oil, the bank is going to recover. And now Juan Carlos Escotet has the capital from Spain to revitalize his own bank. You know what I mean? He never sold it. He was never nationalized. He was smart enough to keep a relationship with the Maduro regime that allowed him to, keep things going in a smaller scale. So that is going to happen too. How much Venezuelan money abroad is going to come back? Not those accounts that were shut down by the Swiss, a few days ago, but the money that was made prior to that has been sitting on the side waiting to go back. How many of the Venezuelan exiles going back and with the money they have? A lot of them kind of stay. They already have lives abroad. So not many people will go back in the short term, but historic migratory movements tell us that most of the migrants go back. It happened with the Sicilians, with the Irish in the US. Curiously enough, the studies prove that once they make they acquire the financial viability they were looking for, they tend to go back. When they have children, the children tend to stay in. But migratory movements are very peculiar in that sense. So we might expect that in Venezuela, though that would happen too. I believe that in the medium to long term, Venezuela will be a very viable country. In the short term, it's still going to be complicated. It's going to be messy. With the difference in other countries, I mean, copper is a big engine now in Peru's growth and balance of payments, but copper goes slowly. Now it's going faster, but it's slow because it's not oil. There's nothing like oil. And this oil now has a producer and has a consumer, which is the US, and has the yield of the local powers that be, the new regime, to yield to what they want. Okay, so all in all, it's not a bad equation for Venezuelans. The consequences when it comes to international law are going to come. Of course, it's just a matter of time. And that's
this is the first optimistic discourse on Latin America that I've heard in a long time. You even have me excited.
It's an oily story, John. I mean, an oil is always like that. Oh, there's nothing like oil, isn't it? And Venezuela has a lot of it. Now we have copper, silver, gold, but it's not the same because it's not oil. I mean, we consume the damn thing every day. I mean, 100 million barrels a day, and we're going to consume 122, 124. That's more or less where the consensus is these days. Okay. There's a deficit of 6 million barrels in the next decade. It's going to come from Venezuela. So geologically, Venezuela is transparent because of the oil opening of the 90s. It's not the case in Saudi Arabia. The geology of Saudi Arabia is a dark box. It's a black box that only the Saudis know. That beautiful large oil field in Saudi Arabia can collapse tomorrow. What happened to Cantarell to Pemex, and we wouldn't know. But Venezuela is open. It's transparent. We understand the geology completely. We understand the business. I mean, and it's being put together by Americans that capital is not a problem. I mean, Ramon Espinaza, the head economist of PDVSA and the head energy economist of IDB, who died a few years ago, unfortunately very young, he was a good friend, and we used to discuss. He said, we're going to get $36 billion a year to increase production. Money is not a problem anymore. It used to be when Ramon was still alive. Now it's $100 billion. That's 4 years of dividends and buybacks of Chevron alone. So that's what you have to, and we need more oil because we're gonna consume
earnings of NVIDIA.
Exactly. We're not consume more oil because we consume less, and there it goes. I mean, I'm a liberal, but all in all, talking about real politics, Trump's move is a good move. It's complicated. It's complex, I mean, when it comes to international law, but when it comes to business, I mean, when it comes to oil, we deal with the Saudis and the Nigerians, Russians. Oil is a dirty business, literally,
Well, I like the optimism. Yeah. Tom, I think we should wrap up here.
Yeah,
We've been,
Jose, thank you. We've gone over time.
Fantastic.
Yeah, wonderful. Jose, I know you're heading to Latin America at the end of the week. Wish you safe travels.
Thank you.
And I know you'll be in Caracas soon, maybe earlier than some of these guys, some of these investors supposedly going there in March.
Yeah, I have very good friends in Caracas, like really, really dear, close friends. And I left an apartment in Plaza Francia back in 2010 that's still there.
Well, we'll be having dinner at Lee Hamilton's again one of these days.
Soon.
Places.
Absolutely.
Next time in Caracas.
Thank you, buddy.
Okay, take care. Thanks for the interview.